With this, join me in welcoming Anustup Nayak, Director of Central Square Foundation, joining us live to share his views on demystifying the science of teaching, a structured pedagogy approach to raise foundational learning. Over to you, Anustup.
Thank you, Prerna, for that interesting introduction. I am delighted to be here with all of you. I would love to take some questions at the end. So if you have questions, do send it to the chat bot, and then I'll try to answer it at the end. So the topic today is to find a way of how do we equip every teacher in this country to succeed in the classroom every day. And I want us to keep thinking about it because this is a thorny problem which has not been solved. If we look at the data coming out of our classrooms, oftentimes it looks like a wicked problem, that one which we have been trying to solve for a very long time but haven't been able to solve it. Almost 250 million children go to school in our country, and very few of them are leaving the classroom with the kind of skills that would take them forward in life. And you see flat learning profiles, which means that by grade 3 or grade 4, children have just stopped learning the basic skills. And if children aren't able to master these basic skills by grade 3 or grade 4, then the later part of their journey becomes very challenging. And on the other side, if you look at the practice of teaching, that what happens in the classroom when a teacher is actually having a conversation with children, and you look at the data coming out of the classrooms, you see that a lot of that classroom discourse is largely about lecturing, largely about a one-way transmission, a one-way broadcast from the teacher to the child. And how do we go about changing this? The narrative always has been that we start blaming teachers. However, that is not very helpful. What if we start looking at the teacher as a professional and equip her to succeed in the classroom every day? But before we do that, I want you to spend a minute thinking about, if you were a teacher in our country serving in either a government school or an affordable private school, what are you coming into the domain with? You're coming in almost underprepared into the classroom. My training is very heavy on training, on theory, and very little connection to what happens in the classroom. I may know a lot about Piaget and Vygotsky, but may have very little understanding of how to put all of that into the classroom. The outcomes that I'm given with to work with in terms of what is that my lesson is going to lead to, I'm often unclear. That isn't really a standard toolkit that I can use every day to plan my lessons, to use materials in the classroom. And even if I do have them, they're very dense, thick, and hard to understand. And finally, one of the most troublesome aspects of my job is that I don't get to see a master practitioner at work. But contrast that with how professionals in other domains are trained. So think of a lawyer. A lawyer, if you want to be a lawyer, you need to really understand what are the tenets of this constitution. So there are very clear guidelines on what to aspire for. If you are an engineer or a scientist, you have a detailed process of your domain. If you're a doctor or any other professional, you also have some tools that are proven to work inside your field of action. And last and not the least, most of you would have watched a master practitioner in action. So if you are training to be a doctor, you have watched a surgeon stitch a trauma wound or treat a patient or do a diagnostic. And that is all of these ingredients are essential to succeeding in that profession. The case I'm going to make today is, what if we bring the same level of rigor to preparing our teachers as we do for other professionals in our country? What if every teacher is equipped with 4 critical ingredients that would make her successful in the classroom? First, does she have clear objectives for teaching a lesson? Does she know exactly what a child will attain in terms of competencies at the end of the lesson or at the end of the grade or the end of a unit? Second, is she equipped with a scientific teaching process, much like a semiconductor engineer knows the exact working of a microchip. Similarly, does she have very high quality, easy to use classroom tools, and ones that she readily understands, ones that convey her work to in a way that is very simple, step-by-step instructions to follow. And finally, can a teacher experience a demonstration by a master practitioner in her field of the micro practices that work in the classroom? And when you combine all of these ingredients together, the simple term for all of this is structured pedagogy. Structured pedagogy is nothing but ensuring that teaching becomes a science, and also it becomes a structured approach to equip a practitioner to succeed every day. Let's look at whether structured pedagogy works or not. The evidence across the world on structured pedagogy is actually staggering, and it's surprising that this evidence is often not studied by practitioners and policymakers. A review of almost 200 plus programs in 50 low and medium income countries shows that structured pedagogy has had a dramatic effect on student learning. In Kenya, a program called Prima and Tusome, where a tightly knit package of coaching, of training, and teacher manuals and children's materials stitched together, brought into the classroom, has shown dramatic results on student learning. And closer home, if you look at programs like Room to Read, which have achieved dramatic results, if you look at Room to Read's results in India, on an average, children read at 12 correct words per minute, and this program has been able to raise that to almost double that number in a short period of time. And all of this happens because these programs have been able to stitch together an entire ecosystem of tools to equip the teacher, starting with clear outcomes, with detailed process of how to use these tools in the classroom, and training which actually equips teachers to succeed in the classroom. And finally, one of the things I want to talk about is clear 4 or 5 steps which can bring the structured pedagogy into the classroom. The first step is really specifying clear and well-sequenced micro-learning objectives, which means that if you look at a child's learning, it's almost like the child is climbing a set of stairs. Imagine school learning as climbing different stairs to learn fractions, or to learn multiplication, or to learn phonological awareness. And each of this has many, many small steps. And if each of those steps are clearly defined for the teacher and the child, then you have greater chances for the learning to be highly targeted and for the child and teacher to succeed in the classroom. The second aspect, which is around the science of teaching itself, there is a very large body of evidence which now details out what are some of the best ways to teach literacy and numeracy. So for example, if you want to teach mathematics to children, it's proven that sequencing instructions so that you go from simple to complex, you go from known to unknown, you go from concrete to an abstract works. And some of these practices many of these practices actually are visible in literacy instruction as well. That, if you're teaching literacy as a fine balance between what are called the more sort of lower order skills and higher order skills, you achieve greater success. And can teaching be first decoded into the steps? Decoding is important for the science, but one more step needs to be done, which is encoding them back almost like a recipe into what a teacher can understand. So what I'm showing here is a lesson plan, and there are lots of lesson plans available out there. But what I want you to understand is, if you want to create a resource for a teacher, can we make it really engaging? Can we make it really interesting for the teacher to absorb that information? Is it structured? Does it have clear objectives? Are some of these activities that the teacher is doing explained in a way that the teacher can get it instantly. They're linked to each other. And finally, there is a clear sequence of instructional steps which the teacher can follow. With that as a base, then the teacher can go forward in the classroom. And the last step is demonstrating micro practices of effective teaching. That is one big thing missing in our teacher training programs, that when we are training teachers for the classroom, we are not helping them see what good practice looks like. If you go to some of the best teacher training programs, you will see, and at least the ones that I have seen work, for example, the Funda One Day program in South Africa, they have highly structured, well-sequenced videos on what a very micro practice like guided reading looks like. Or closer home, you're looking at some of the courses created by Teacher App, you see very, very specific demonstrations of good classroom practice. If we are able to stitch these four things together, clear outcomes, second, very structured yet easy to use teacher resources, which include lesson plans and materials, and then ensuring that this is demonstrated to teachers in a way that they can actually experience good practice, you will see results in the classroom. And many of these programs are actually in play in India. And what I'm going to show you now is a program called Mission Prerna, which is being now implemented in UP, where many organizations have come together, like Language and Learning Foundation and SoulSart, and the organization I work for, Central Square Foundation, to implement a structured pedagogy approach where there are clear learning goals. There are very simple materials for the teachers and students. There is assessment, and the teacher training is all tied in. And this kind of material is also very contextualized to the settings. Finally, I'm going to end with some concerns that have been raised about the structured pedagogy approach. And one of these big concerns is that, does a structured pedagogy approach mean that we are tying down the teacher, we're almost spoon-feeding them? And does it kill the creativity and agency of the teacher? It's anything but that. If you go into the classrooms where these structured pedagogical practices are being used, you see that when teachers are equipped with the right tools, it saves their valuable time, but it also reduces their cognitive load. So they're free to do higher order work with children. So for example, asking children open-ended questions, understanding individual needs of children, so on and so forth. Also, it does not limit itself to very teacher-directed learning. So when there are clear learning steps to engage the child, you see actually children participating a lot more. And I'll end here and stop here to see if we have some questions that I could answer. I hope we have some time for it. So let me go to the chat and see if we have some questions here. Are there some questions, Prerna, which have come up? I don't see them in the chat. So Sushmita is saying, I can't agree more. I do this for my teachers, very effective to have exact flow of steps. Absolutely, Sushmita, it seems that you are in the classroom and you're doing work that is really useful. Thank you, Sunita. How can we demonstrate better to the teachers? What are some practical ways? It's a great question Anu is asking. I think the first step to demonstration is break down teaching into smaller steps, because oftentimes demonstration can mean something very big. So for example, if you're teaching a lesson on, let's say, sequencing of numbers, or for that matter, you're teaching children decoding, can you break it up into smaller steps and demonstrate each of those steps? So for example, can there be a structured step where you are checking for previous knowledge of the students? Can there be one step where you're conducting a hands-on activity with the children and demonstrate that? Can there be a demonstration of asking higher order questions? Can there be demonstration of wait time? Because oftentimes we don't wait. So I think the kind of demonstration that works best is one which is broken up into micro steps, and each of those steps are explained. So Nirmal is asking, while structured pedagogy helps teachers freeze time, how does one get teachers to treat it so and actually use the time to build higher order skills in children? That's a great question. I think part of that is providing, again, a structure for that conversation. Very often that is left. So there isn't, teachers aren't often given enough training in questioning itself. Questioning itself is a skill. So can we start with understanding? So the first could be to help children explain their understanding. Start with a small check for understanding, then perhaps peel the onion, so to say, further with why and how kind of questions, which explore whether there is a conceptual understanding there, and perhaps go into the more so what type of questions which explore more of the application, so on and so forth. So questioning itself is a skill, and oftentimes that needs to be explicitly demonstrated to teachers. Great, we are over time. Request you to wrap up. Thank you, Prerna, for providing this opportunity. I hope the audience has taken away classroom. I wish you all the best.